The Minneapolis Standoff, a city divided and a shadow on the shield. Minneapolis wakes under a tense calm. Barricades line streets, police stand idle, and neighbors watch from behind curtains. Amid buzzing social media, fear, broken trust, and a divided city test the systems meant to protect it. Dive deeper into crime, prison, and the psychology behind it. Subscribe, like, share, and comment. Your clicks keep the stories coming. The day the city held its breath. The morning begins slowly, with the low hum of early traffic interrupted by the distant wail of sirens. Officers arrive at precincts in staggered shifts, faces serious, hands scanning radios, eyes tracing the streets ahead. Coffee cups sit half full on desks, untouched, as commanders review maps, camera feeds, and intelligence reports. Neighborhoods feel tense, residents moving cautiously along sidewalks, glancing at uniformed patrols and barricaded streets. Every intersection has a presence. Marked cars, officers on foot, and the occasional armored vehicle quietly parked like a sentinel. Cell phone footage shows clusters of people gathering, some curious, some angry, some anxious, while the camera pans over city blocks lined with boarded windows. A drone captures the aerial view. A grid of streets, some blocked, some open, all under silent observation. Inside a command center, monitors flicker with multiple feeds, officers discussing strategy, coordinating movement, and assessing risk. Meanwhile, local businesses shutter their doors, employees peeking from behind curtains, unsure if customers will arrive or confrontations will flare. A fire station stands idle, firefighters watching the streets with quiet concern, knowing that any emergency will now be layered with tension and caution. In a high-rise apartment, a resident gazes over the city, seeing lights flashing in the distance, cameras recording, and officers moving methodically below. The tension is not visible on every street, but it exists in the pauses between footsteps, the conversations stopped mid-word, the quiet glances exchanged on porches. Dispatchers field calls that range from ordinary reports to urgent warnings, each tone carrying weight, as if every beep of the radio reminds everyone that the situation could escalate at any moment. Community leaders make phone calls to colleagues and city officials, trying to calm fears, coordinate responses, and prevent minor conflicts from becoming major incidents. Social media streams become both a lifeline and a source of anxiety, as residents and outsiders alike share videos, updates, and speculation about what might happen next. An officer adjusts his vest, checking equipment, reviewing protocols for crowd management, and silently rehearsing every possible scenario in his mind. A mother pulls her children closer in an apartment, explaining in simple words that they must stay inside, that safety comes from staying calm, and that the city outside is acting differently than it did yesterday. A news camera pans slowly over a row of quiet homes, capturing empty streets except for uniformed figures and a few cautious pedestrians. The smell of coffee mixes with the faint metallic tang of police vehicles, an ordinary scent made strange by the weight of anticipation. An ambulance idles nearby, paramedics inside ready for any medical situation, aware that tension can quickly lead to accidents, panic, or injuries. A street artist pauses, spray paint in hand, looking at the walls of the city, realizing that even art cannot exist untouched by the undercurrent of fear. A cyclist stops at a corner, noticing barricades and officers, and wonders if the city he knows so well is disappearing behind a temporary shield. In a small apartment, a resident records the scene outside, thinking the footage may be needed later, but unsure if it will be shared with caution or used to fuel rumor. Officers exchange quiet updates, scanning feeds, counting personnel, adjusting patrol patterns as the city slowly seems to hold its breath. In one precinct, a veteran officer reflects silently, aware that decisions made today will ripple through neighborhoods, families, and careers long after the immediate tension fades. A city bus sits idling at a stop, passengers inside looking out windows at streets they once traveled freely, now constrained by barriers, law enforcement, and fear of the unknown. A local store owner locks a door, takes inventory, and wonders if patience and calm will be enough to protect his livelihood today. A park sits empty, swings swaying slightly in the wind, grass flattening under footsteps that will not come, a quiet reminder of normal life paused. A police canine unit rests nearby, dogs alert but controlled, trained to respond with precision in moments of chaos. A photographer crouches behind a low wall, capturing the contrast of calm neighborhoods and heightened security, understanding that these images will tell a story long after the tension dissipates. In an alley, a group of teenagers pause, sensing the change in the city, aware that adults are behaving differently and that the streets are no longer predictable. Officers prepare de-escalation teams, social workers coordinate with law enforcement, and every official understands the delicate balance between authority and community trust. A single siren pierces the silence, drawing attention to a distant corner of the city, a reminder that the situation is not static, and that observation and patience are now the most valuable tools. Through it all, the city waits, people caught between fear and hope, trust and uncertainty, as the shadow of the standoff lingers over streets, homes, and hearts. Every step, every glance, every decision is under scrutiny, and every choice has consequences. Some immediate, some lasting, and some that will echo long after the cameras are gone. Decisions in the shadows. The city remains quiet in some streets, but in precincts and command centers, the air hums with tension and constant radio chatter. Officers study maps, marking locations of reported gatherings, potential threats, and sensitive neighborhoods, their fingers tracing routes with deliberate care. A detective reviews video footage from security cameras, pausing on every frame, noting patterns of movement, vehicles, and the expressions of civilians who may be caught in the standoff. A social worker makes calls to local residents, quietly asking them to stay indoors, explaining procedures, and trying to calm the fear that pulses through the community. Street corners once familiar are now under close observation, each stoplight and lamppost scanned by officers, drones, and patrols looking for anomalies. A city planner observes the barricades set up overnight, considering how emergency vehicles will navigate if a crisis emerges, realizing the delicate balance between public safety and public restriction. Community leaders meet with police representatives in a small office, papers and laptops scattered across tables, trying to negotiate temporary agreements that protect residents while allowing law enforcement to operate effectively. In a nearby high-rise, a journalist reviews footage from a rooftop drone, carefully framing shots to capture both the emptiness of the streets and the presence of law enforcement without sensationalizing the situation. A mother peers through her blinds, children clinging to her side, watching officers move in measured steps, each one signaling caution and readiness. On a rooftop, an officer adjusts binoculars, noting suspicious packages or unusual activity, understanding that even small movements can escalate tension instantly. Dispatchers field repeated calls, some panicked, some confused, some reporting harmless incidents, all requiring careful filtering to ensure nothing critical is missed. A detective studies data from mobile phone triangulation, analyzing crowd movement, and predicting where groups might converge, knowing every calculation could prevent conflict or disaster. In a narrow alley, an older resident feeds stray cats, quietly observing uniformed officers passing by, feeling the city's heartbeat shift under the weight of surveillance. Officers prepare non-lethal equipment, shields and batons arranged in a ready line, while mental health professionals review protocols for conflict resolution and negotiation. A squad car parks near a school, officers inside watching hallways and playgrounds empty, ensuring children remain safe without alarming them unnecessarily. A drone camera captures overhead shots of the city grid, showing intersections cordoned off, streets blocked, and neighborhoods caught in suspended motion. Inside a precinct, a commander gathers officers for a briefing, emphasizing calm, patience, and measured action, knowing that overreaction could inflame a city already tense with distrust. A volunteer community group sets up a hotline to provide information to residents, tracking updates, and offering guidance on how to navigate the unusual restrictions safely. A street sweeper passes an empty downtown block, its brushes catching debris in silence, a small reminder that life continues even amid disruption. An ambulance sits idling outside a hospital entrance, paramedics reviewing emergency plans, aware that any medical crisis may intersect with law enforcement operations. At a local corner store, shelves sit half-stocked, and the owner wipes counters, glancing outside at officers pacing the streets, feeling the city's usual rhythm replaced by uncertainty. A patrol officer notices a lone pedestrian crossing a quiet intersection and briefly considers approach protocols, balancing authority with the need to avoid escalation. City buses pause at stations, empty of passengers, engines idling as drivers exchange quiet updates with dispatch, aware that public transit is now intertwined with safety concerns. Inside an apartment, a resident scrolls through social media updates, attempting to separate fact from rumor, feeling the tension that grows as feeds show varying perspectives on the standoff. A detective marks timelines on a whiteboard, connecting incidents, calls, and footage into a coherent picture, aware that missing one piece could have serious consequences. An officer quietly observes a small group of neighbors on a corner, noting body language, expressions, and posture, assessing threat levels without interference. A local pastor prays silently in an empty church, asking for calm, patience, and protection for those caught in the middle of the unfolding tension. A security camera captures the same intersection multiple times, officers cross-referencing footage with reports, each second analyzed for signs of escalation. A resident looks out over the city skyline, noticing the distant glow of police lights, the quiet movement of people, and feeling the weight of fear and uncertainty pressing from every direction. Officers rehearse evacuation procedures in vacant buildings, mapping exits, points of entry, and containment zones, preparing for scenarios that they hope never occur. A street musician sets down their guitar, sensing the city's unusual pause, the silence heavier than any note they could play. Dispatch radios crackle with updates from units reporting minor incidents, all cataloged, assessed, and noted, every interaction a reminder of the city's fragile balance. Through it all, the city waits. Children glance at police vehicles on the streets, workers step lightly past barricades, and residents hold conversations in hushed tones, all feeling the same unspoken question. How long will this standoff last, and what will remain when it ends? Every decision made in command centers, on sidewalks, and behind cameras has consequences. Some immediate, some lasting, and some that ripple far beyond the streets, into trust, community, and human lives. And as the sun begins to dip below the horizon, the city remains under watchful eyes, every street, window, and step carrying the tension of a day spent balancing fear, authority, and hope. The city under pressure. A mother leans against the window, children pressed close to her side, watching the empty streets below, the flashing lights of patrol cars reflecting off asphalt. The hum of drones overhead mixes with distant sirens, creating a soundtrack of unease that blankets entire neighborhoods. In an apartment complex, a man sips coffee slowly, eyes flicking between social media updates and the street outside, uncertainty pressing on him like a weight he cannot shake. Neighbors exchange quiet whispers on porches, measuring every word, aware that fear can spread faster than information. A delivery driver pauses at a barricade, checking instructions from dispatch before deciding whether to risk proceeding or turn back. Police officers march in careful formations through downtown streets, shields and radios at the ready, every movement deliberate to prevent escalation. A teenager rides his bike through a quiet alley, helmet slightly askew, glancing at the shadows for signs of tension, curiosity, and anxiety entwined. Inside a high-rise office, employees glance nervously at news feeds and security cameras, aware that business as usual no longer exists. In a small church, volunteers pack food supplies for residents who cannot leave their homes safely, a quiet act of service amid chaos. A local cafe remains closed, chairs stacked on tables, the usual aroma of roasted beans replaced by silence and uncertainty. On a quiet street corner, a group of young adults sits in a circle, sharing phones, watching updates, and debating what might happen next. Their expressions a mixture of fear and fascination. Inside a precinct, a sergeant marks incidents on a whiteboard, tracking everything from minor disturbances to high-priority alerts, each line representing real people's lives. A delivery drone hovers above a park, its camera scanning, capturing empty playgrounds and rustling leaves, documenting a city paused in unusual stillness. A security guard walks along a boarded-up storefront, flashlight in hand, the faint hum of the city behind him reminding him that vigilance is constant. In a downtown parking garage, vehicles remain still, engines off, shadows of officers moving in the distance, silent witnesses to the tension outside. Residents on upper floors peer through curtains, comparing what they see with what they read online, the contrast amplifying anxiety and distrust. A paramedic team sits quietly in a truck, reviewing protocols, knowing any emergency call now carries an added layer of risk and unpredictability. A street artist pauses mid-spray, observing the empty avenues, aware that expression has become muted under the weight of fear and observation. A group of friends gather in an apartment living room, watching live footage, the room filled with murmurs, sighs, and the quiet clicking of a mouse. In a local grocery store, shelves are half empty as people stock up cautiously, movements slower than usual, eyes constantly scanning entrances. An elderly resident walks a dog down an otherwise silent block, careful to avoid officers while still maintaining routine, balancing normalcy with caution. A drone captures a wide shot of the city skyline, lights flashing across buildings, streets blocked, and vehicles strategically positioned, highlighting a city in a delicate state of tension. Inside a police vehicle, two officers exchange quiet words, reviewing protocols for civilian engagement, the weight of responsibility etched on their faces. A mother tucks her children into bed early, soft lullabies drowned out by distant sirens, trying to provide comfort despite the uncertainty pressing on her. At a city intersection, a single streetlight flickers, highlighting an empty crosswalk, a momentary pause in the constant movement of patrols and monitoring. A small business owner leans against a counter, phone pressed to his ear, trying to reach employees and suppliers while balancing fear for his livelihood and safety. A security camera records the empty streets, officers, and residents moving cautiously, footage that will later serve as documentation of a city frozen in tension. Inside an apartment building lobby, residents exchange nervous smiles, acknowledging each other without words, the shared anxiety creating a quiet, unspoken community. A drone captures a line of barricades along a main street, officers behind them, vehicles parked strategically, and civilians moving cautiously, the scene tense yet controlled. Paramedics review possible evacuation routes, considering every potential obstacle, aware that split-second decisions now carry greater consequence. On a rooftop, a lone officer watches over a neighborhood, binoculars scanning for movement, the city below a chessboard of human behavior, caution, and uncertainty. A street sweeper passes silently down a downtown avenue, its brushes catching fallen leaves and debris, a reminder that life persists even amid disruption. Inside a small apartment, a resident writes in a journal, capturing observations, fears, and reflections, a personal attempt to process the weight of the day. Across the city, families prepare dinner quietly, checking news feeds, phone alerts, and exterior sounds, each step an attempt to maintain routine amidst unpredictability. The city's parks are silent except for wind and rustling leaves, playground swings swaying alone, symbolizing a pause in ordinary life as the shadow of the standoff lingers. Every resident, officer, and official feels the same tension. The balance between action and restraint, fear and patience, control and uncertainty, knowing that the smallest choices can ripple far beyond a single block. The city holds its breath again as evening approaches. Lights and windows flicker on. Sirens continue their distant wail, and every human in Minneapolis is reminded of the invisible weight pressing on daily life.